Welcome to the Brothers Truck Parts Workshop.
Are we excited about this project that we're going to be showing you guys? We're going to do an engine swap. I got the customer who's interested in a 5.3 liter LC5. I've got Steve Flanders from Brothers Truck Parts here to help us. There's a lot of work entailed in this, isn't there?
There is, yeah. Commonly called the LS swap. I like your specific term there, but yeah, there's a lot of work. There's fuel system, there's wiring, there's all kinds of stuff. But the thing is, we're going to make this easy for the guys at home to follow along. And you know, over the next few weeks, we'll show everybody all of the intricate pieces of doing an LS swap in a classic pickup.
Well, let's start off by taking off the hood, then we're going to take this thing up in the air.
So before you rip your car apart, your truck apart, we've actually marked this, give us some index points so that later on when we go to put this back together in a few days, that we can line the hood up really easily. So make sure you get yourself a scribe or a paint marker or something. Give yourself some index points on the hood so that when you put it back on, you can get it back on straight and you don't have to monkey around with the alignment.
That's a great point. You guys, this isn't going to be too heavy for you.
Well, that's why we're doing the heavy lifting and you're not. That's why we gave you the wrench.
All right, you got it? Come on out. We'll take this thing in the showroom, put it somewhere safe.
Now that we have easy access to the engine compartment, we're going to get all our fluids drained, and we're going to just get everything out of the way and make it super simple to pull our motor out. And then when we're done with that, we'll get the truck up in the air, get the exhaust and drivetrain out of there, and all our bolts loose from underneath.
As you can see, we're continuing on with the prep of our C10 engine swap project. And you guys want to make sure to take your time doing this because it's going to make the end result so much better. The engine bay was absolutely nasty, over 50 years of dirt and grime. We got all that off, and the only thing that we need to save on the wiring on this truck is what they added as far as the air ride suspension goes. So we're going to run all new power and ground wires because we've got a high amp alternator, and we're not going to use any of the old wires because we don't know the history of them. Now Steve went ahead and took off the regulator. I'm going to go ahead and cut the end off.
Now you got to fish it through here. No, this
Go ahead.
This
there
way.
You go.
Thank you. So like Sam said, the prep is the most important part. You know, you want to get a clean frame. We had this pressure wash, like Sam mentioned, and you want to have a clean slate. And getting all this stuff out of here is just going to help us with that clean slate when we go to put our LS back in.
Yeah, because we don't need any of this mechanical stuff. We're going with a whole new Dakota digital gauge from Steve that he brought. It's very nice. I can't wait for you guys to see this. And most of this wire harness, like we got to keep it for the blower motor. But we're going to go ahead and finish our prep. We have to put in a fuel system. So next we're going to take off our bed and they'll be ready to go on with all new parts. All right, we're ready to get this bed off of this truck. Now remember, you guys at home may not have a lift. This is not a one-person job. You'll definitely need 3 friends to help you lift this bed up. And please make sure you disconnect the wire harness underneath. And now we could go ahead and hit the button, pull this bed up. And that way it'll give us access to the rest of the exhaust. We'll go ahead and cut it out, getting us ready to go ahead and mount our fuel system and continue on with our engine swap. I'm looking good on this side.
Right. All of this is part of the preparation process. And, you know, like I said earlier, the more prep you do, the easier the job goes. So getting the bed out of the way is going to make it much easier for us to address the fuel system, as well as clean up some of the rest of the chassis. All right, that's good. All right, you can see how easy it is to get to the exhaust now. We'll hack that off. You gotta pull out that cross member so we can mount our gas tank later down the road.
Yep.
Do a little cleanup. Most of our prep's gonna be done.
Absolutely, and so don't forget to tune in next week and watch us prep the motor and go ahead and install it in the truck.
Welcome to the Brothers Truck Parts Workshop.
Well, we're back here with our engine swap in our C10 project, and as you can see, we've completely prepped this motor, giving it some bling, but we've also had to put a lot of parts on it to make this even possible. Isn't that right?
That's true. So the original manifolds had to go away because they don't clear the frame, and these are specific manifolds that we sell for a LS swap, as well as the oil pan. This is part of our LS swap kit, and what it does is it makes the oil pan more shallow. And so what that does is just give us some ground clearance, because otherwise we'd have the oil pan hanging way below the cross member, and that's never a good thing. Also, we bolted on as you can see on your side here, that's our LS swap engine bracket set, and it's got a slider in it so we can have some adjustment there. So once we get this down in there, we'll be able to maneuver it back and forth, get our clearance on our firewall as well as some of the clearance that we might need in the front here for our fans and such. Yep. And then as well, you and I did this a little while ago, we've taken these old mounts off the frame and we put our LS conversion mounts onto the frame, and so those are going to mount right onto the motor where we've got our slider mounts up there, so that'll all work together. And then, you know, the last but not least here,
we've got our cross member down there as well.
Yep, we've taken our factory transmission cross member out.
Yep.
That thing's
12
giant,
rivets
it's heavy,
there.
it's garbage. And we've got our universal transmission mount there that's going to bolt up here, mount to our frame, make everything real easy. You know what's real key about this, let's just get this thing moving in here. What's real key about this, this engine conversion parts that we've developed is that it helps the drivetrain alignment. It makes the drivetrain alignment real easy, and you know as well as I do, if you don't have the right drivetrain alignment, your car gets all hoppy and your drivetrain angles get horrible. So this kit that we developed actually kind of takes some of the guesswork out of that stuff. Yeah, good.
And this is going to require for
Rock
sure
it back flat.
a couple of friends.
Okay, you got it? And if you guys notice, we took off our front assembly, the accessories, because the LC5, which comes out of a 5.3 Silverado, has about 2 inches forward facing of the water pump, and the balancer comes out 2 inches further than like a LS3 or an LS1 or 2. So what we're going to do to clear our new radiator and fan shroud, come up a little, we are going to take off the LC5 Silverado drive assembly for the accessories and put on a LS3 so that we have more clearance in front of the motor and the fan for the shroud.
Is yours going in? All the way?
Yeah. Okay, well, we just got James to put our nuts on the bottom, and we went ahead and tightened up our bolts from up top, and this motor is in, except now we have to go underneath and do the cross members. So let's go ahead and get this hoist out of the way and go up in the air, and we'll finish the swap by putting in the cross member for the transmission.
Right.
All right, guys, we went ahead and drilled our holes and installed our LS swap cross member. This thing went in pretty good, huh?
Yeah, it did. And with that, we're done with the engine part of it. But you know what? Check back next week when we work on our wiring, our fuel delivery, and all the other peripheral stuff that goes with an LS swap.
Welcome to the Brothers Truck Parts Workshop.
We've made some serious progress on our C10 LS swap.
Yes, we have. And we have a bunch of accessories that we bolted onto the front here. And I want you to explain this because even as seasoned as I am with all these classic car and stuff, I don't understand how you chose these accessories.
Well, we need a clearance for the radiator.
Right.
The truck accessories were about 2 inches too far forward.
Okay.
So to get rid of that 2 inches, you want to go to a sports car configuration.
Gotcha.
Okay, now depending on whether you're going to run power steering or whether you have future plans on doing an AC, most cases the AC sits on the top left of the engine.
All
and
right.
I like symmetry under the hood. I want you to see both things. So you choose a C5 or a C6 if you're running power steering. Gives you that symmetry. But because the C7... Corvette stuff, exactly.
Right.
If you want the symmetry and you're not running power steering, then you go with the C7 because it's got electric power steering. So therefore the C7 bracket bolts onto an LS3, which is basically the same head as an LC5.
Awesome. So what if you had a motor though that had the long snout that we had before?
Well, if you have the clearance, then you can run it and you save a bunch of money doing it.
And then if you don't, you go shopping for sports car parts?
Absolutely. GTO, C5, C6, C7.
And then this is expandable, so you could expand it if you wanted to?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
It gives you a lot of different configurations, and in this way, if you ever need a belt and you're going cruising, you can get it off the shelf.
Awesome.
Any local auto parts store.
Yeah, this makes it super easy. I was just a little confused about why we went this route, and thank you, that clears it up.
Absolutely.
All right, so what I have though is the drop-in radiator for the LS conversion, and Brothers makes this. And it's key to use an LS style radiator for when you're doing the conversion because it has a spot for the steam port, and that's important for these heads.
It just looks better that way as well.
Right, and the cool thing about these radiators is they actually do just drop right in, and we make these for all the Chevy and GMC trucks so that the LS swap is really easy for our guys, and you can see that that just fits right back in. And then we've modified the top bracket to give us a little extra clearance because we were short.
And don't be afraid to modify things when you're doing something this big on a classic car or truck, guys. Whenever you guys are doing an engine swap, there's always under hood temperatures that people worry about. There's a lot of overheating going on. This radiator is key to an engine swap. Aluminum, a lot better cooling effectiveness here, except for we also went with a 160-degree thermostat because we're not worried about OBD2 emissions or anything like that. The factory has a 195. Dropping the underhood temperature by 35 degrees is absolutely huge. Then you add the Brothers aluminum radiator and you're golden.
Right, and we're going to use a Holley fuel injection and wiring harness. If you weren't, the Brothers radiator comes with the whole wiring so you can wire it up to your OBD2 system, and it'll run the fan and everything.
With a temperature-controlled ground circuit for the relay. It's wonderful. That way
Right.
you forget about it. There's no switch on the inside. It does it automatically.
Right, and we're not going to use that in this because the Holley takes care of that.
Absolutely.
Right.
You guys, when you're doing your radiator hoses, you're going to have to physically go to the store, take a coat hanger, and cut it up, bend it into shape. Go to the store, usually the bigger store in your town that's got the most radiator hoses on the wall. And you're just going to have to pick a couple of hoses off the wall that's going to match your swap. In this case, we needed 2 tight 90s. Even though you see right here it's tight, we're going to have clearance. We clearance this. We have ½ an inch in front of the water pump since nothing is moving and it'll all be stationary. We're not worried about anything rubbing there. And the lower hose is going to be a little tricky, but there's lots of hoses on the wall, and I've never been let down.
All right, we basically have our cooling system done. Water pump, pulleys, brackets, fan belt, everything. We're basically ready to move on to something else.
Absolutely. So make sure you guys tune in next week to watch us install the complete fuel system.
Welcome to the Brothers Truck Parts Workshop.
We are at one of the most important installs on our LS swap and our C10. The fuel system has to be converted to a fuel injection setup in order to get the engine to run properly without going dry.
That's true.
And I've got Steve here who's going to explain to you guys exactly how to modify your fuel tank and getting that done.
So what we've already done is we've cut a 4-inch hole out in the top of the tank, and we've put our holes around that in order to put our mounting plate in. And the important part of this is that when we chose the location, we made sure that the piece that we're putting in, our new pump assembly, is not interfering with the gas tank sending unit that we're going to leave so our fuel gauge still works. So we made sure that those aren't interfering. And now I'll kind of show you what we did to make this work. So you saw I stuck it in the tank. We want to make sure that the depth of this matches the exact depth of the top of the tank to the bottom of the tank, because what happens is you don't want to put this in and have it sitting 1.5 inches off the bottom of the tank. You'll have 1.5 inches worth of fuel you'll never be able to get to. So what we did is we put this down in, this is touching the bottom of the tank, and we're going to have that, and we'll be able to use all the fuel we have. And then once we figured that out, I went ahead and measured the distance from the top of our pump to the bottom of the mounting plate, and I cut my hose just right. And make sure you get your clamps on your supply line because that's under pressure. You don't want it sucking air or blowing fuel out. You want that being delivered to the motor. So then once I got all that figured out, I zip tied it in place so it's secure. I ran my return line. You want your return line about 1 inch off the bottom, and you want it inside the sump so it returns fuel back into the sump. The sump is important because in a fuel injection system, you never want the pump to run dry. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a little pond of fuel all the time that this pump is always going to be submerged in. So even when the tank is sloshing around, the pump will always have some fuel. So now here's the tricky part. Mounting the pump inside the tank is going to require that we take this notched plate, get it inside here, and then what I'll typically do is take a couple of the screws that come with the kit, and I'll support the plate with those screws. And then And there's many ways to do this. I've seen guys tape it, but it doesn't, then you got tape left over in your tank and stuff like that, and it's not really a good idea. So I'll support the plate with a couple screws. Insert my pump assembly, and then there's one long screw that comes with the kit, and what I'll do is I'll take that, insert it into the plate, screw it down. What that'll do is that'll support my plate now, and then I'll lift this up, take the other screws out, set this back down, tighten this up a bit, and I'll chase it around. Don't forget to put your gasket in. I just took the shortcut there. Sam, can you just tell them real quickly the best practices when cleaning out the metal that we caused when we cut that big hole?
One great way is to take a magnet, like when you have magnetic trays, put the magnet that's going to fit through the hole that you cut at the very bottom of the tank, making sure you get some penetrating lube, and slosh the penetrating lube around. That'll get all the debris and kind of localize it down into the magnet. It'll grab everything, then you can take it out, you can finalize it with a rag and get all the debris out. It's very important. So you guys tune in next week where we're going to be installing our tank along with the rest of our fuel system.
Welcome to the Brothers Truck Parts Workshop.
All right, we're continuing with the progress on our C10 LS swap, and I'm installing the gas tank. And what I did is I got a jack here, and I got some wood, and I just put it on there, and I'm spreading the load. Now I'm just going to simply jack this up into the frame. There's some holes already here. They line up with our LS gas tank, and I'm just going to bolt that in. After we're done, once we get the bed back on, we go ahead and use this so that we can fill the gas tank through the bed.
You're doing a great job, Steve.
Thanks, buddy.
I'm going to go ahead and install the rest of the fuel system. We've got a GM-style fuel pressure regulator and doubles as a filter. It comes in the Brothers kit. It's marked in and out, but in case it's not marked for some reason or you scrub it off, the bigger, fatter pipe is going to be the feed line, and the thinner one in the middle is going to be the return line. And there is a ground strap right here, so you want to make sure that you clean off the frame rail and you get a good ground on that. It'll keep static electricity from causing any problems. So I found a nice spot right here on the frame rail. I'm going to go ahead and mount the filter. And I'm going to run my line through the frame rail. Right here is a little bit tight. So what I'm going to do is I got some silicone hose. Once I run my fuel lines through, I'm going to wrap it with this, zip tie it in place. That way nothing will rub against the metal, keeping our fuel line safe. And you want to continue that practice all the way up to the front of the engine, and you connect to the EFI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run my hose through the channels because I don't want to waste any of the hose. That way I can use whatever I need on like other pieces like the transmission fluid. We're going to run new lines there. And so right here, I got it to length. I'm going to go to the middle. No, I'm going to go to the side one on this because it's easier to get to. All right, so even though these are bar style fittings, I like to reinforce it with a hose clamp just to make sure nothing can happen down the road. And when you're running your hoses, please make sure to pay attention to your feed and return. Right now I'm doing my feed, so when I come up here, I have to remember to cut my hose to length on the feed side, and this cool Brothers module is completely clearly marked. I'm going to go right there, grab my cutters, cut it to length. I'm going to go ahead and connect my supply line, hook this guy up. Hook this guy up.
Hey Sam, you had a special wrench for that a little while ago.
Yes, sir. Because these fittings cost a good penny, they're very, very nice looking. You don't want to scratch them up by using steel wrenches, so you want to use an aluminum wrench. In this case, we got dash 6s. As you can see, I'm doing the final line for the fuel system. It's going to go from the front of the fuel filter up to the fuel rail. I decided to go to the left side rail because the module is on the left side of the tank. So it just makes more sense. That way you use less of the hose that you're given. You can use it for something else at a later project. So make sure that you use your head, take your time so you don't create a hazard going down the road. And make sure to tune in next week when we go ahead and install the Holley EFI, which is going to crank this truck up.
Welcome to the Brothers Truck Parts Workshop.
We are finally at the meat and potatoes of this engine swap, and that is basically the EFI system that we're going to be using to run this swap. In our case, we're going to be using the Holley EFI Sniper system. We went ahead and went with their intake manifold, fuel rails, and 92mm throttle body. The cool thing about the Sniper system is that it's self-learning. Okay,
Right.
but on top of being self-learning comes with a wideband O2 sensor. If I wanted to do a turbocharger or change the injectors in this car, I could very easily talk to the Sniper EFI unit and do some self-tuning for myself, some custom tuning, if you will. And that's what makes it so versatile. The cool thing is also the computer is weatherproof, and you can put it out here if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But I like to do a nice clean job, so we put it in there behind the dashboard, okay?
Yeah.
Now, in some cases, you may have to cut a connector because it may be too big to go through the hole.
Right, we
you
did
have
that
made.
on this thing.
And you can make a bigger hole if you wanted to.
Sure.
But we took the fuel pump relay and cut it in half and resoldered it inside for a nice clean look.
Nice. And then we're going to be installing these, which were part of the Brothers LS conversion kit, which is the exhaust extensions, and this is where our O2 sensors come in. That's why we got our pre-bunged extensions on there. And this is part of the wiring harness, so we'll plug right in. But what I like about this kit, and I've never used this before, Sam has, all of the stuff is really clearly marked. We've got ignition even, ignition odd, and you know, Chevys are all odd bank, even bank cylinders. So it's been very easy to figure out where everything goes, which is really kind of cool, and all the links are correct and everything. So I kind of like this. In all the previous LS swaps I did, we used a stock harness and you know, did modifications to it to make it work for us. But I like the way this is. It's very simple too, with the you know, basically 2 wires, and then you know, you got 1 or 2 wires on the inside, but it's pretty simple.
You've got a fan wire, you've got a trigger wire for the ignition, making sure, you guys, that when you run the ignition on wire, that it's a constant ignition wire under starting, because you want the computer to stay on while the engine is turning, actually cranking the car. So
Right.
make sure, that's a common mistake a lot of people make.
There's some other real sort of common things that we need to do, whether we're using a stock harness or whether we're using this Holley EFI. You want to make sure your grounds are good. You don't want to go and not connect your ground wires, or connect them to something that isn't making good contact. Also, we're also going to want to put some ground straps from the motor back to the chassis to make sure the motor is grounded to the chassis, so the ground is solid all the way through the wiring harness and the vehicle and everything, because the power to the engine and the power to your harness is only as good as your grounds are.
All right, so why don't you go ahead and put your hand under here, and I'll snake this over to you.
Let me walk around front here.
And this thing, the Holley EFI, has a fuel pressure sensor. If you guys want it to be safe, you can go ahead and incorporate a fuel pressure gauge from Holley, and that way, for some reason, if you guys ever lose fuel pressure, it'll shut off the car. So let's say you're running boost. Boost is very unforgiving, especially a turbo. If you lose fuel, you want to shut the ignition off completely so that you don't detonate and melt the piston. Cool thing, guys, the Brothers radiator, the LS swap radiator, comes with the steam vent, which makes for a nice clean install, and it comes with ports for a trans coolers. You don't have to run an aftermarket one. Being that it's an efficient aluminum one, it'll be sufficient for our case. Can't wait to get this thing done. You guys, don't forget, tune in next week when we finish up this build, crank her up, put the shifter in, and drive this thing down the road. It's going to be awesome.
It is.
A
I can't wait.
65 Patina'd with an LS swap, that is absolutely rad.
Doesn't get better.
Not at all.
Welcome to the Brothers Truck Parts Workshop.
Man, has it been a crazy couple days. We've been thrashing on the LS swap on the C10, and it has finally come down to the point where we're about to crank it up. Now, there's a lot of loose ends you have to do, a lot of detail work that goes into finalizing an engine swap. For instance, the cooling system. Yeah. We never put in antifreeze until we know the engine runs. We've already fired it up, let it run, make sure there's no leaks, and then we go in with antifreeze.
Speaking of leaks, we tested the fuel system before we fired it, made sure that we don't have any leaky injectors or leaky spots back there by the gas tank where we put the new fuel pump in. As well as, you know, we tidied up a bunch of the wiring. I left the wiring over there, the old one we pulled out, and you can see we jerked that thing out of the truck, and we had to still, you know, go back and make our headlights light and stuff like that. So when you're at home doing an LS swap, you're going to find the same stuff. There's some details, if you're running a drive-by wire or a drive-by cable, you're gonna have to sort those out on your own. We had to make some brackets here to work with our Holley system so that we can run our cable back to our stock throttle pedal. And
I might add,
yeah,
you did an absolute fantastic job with those
Thank you.
straps.
I like to say we improvised really well. We used some gas tank straps from our gas tank, leftover ones, and we made brackets out of those. So
we
that's
did
pretty
a
cool.
great job.
Anyway, we've been tidying up a whole bunch of stuff. The guys have been working really hard on wiring the fan and wiring the alternator, and it's just a long process.
Yeah, we got a lot of cleanup work. It looks a lot better under here than it did before.
Right, and one of the other details that you're going to come across is that, once you got all this electronics, your analog gauges aren't going to work anymore, so that's something you're going to want to address. Now, Brother sells a bolt-in OBD2 compatible one, but there's many options out there, and so, like I said, when you're doing this right, there's so many things that you have to address along the way that are small details, and those are things we can't really pick what's going to work for guys at home or not, and we had to sort those out for ourselves.
That dashboard would have worked great if we had been running a GM setup, OBD2 connector inside. It would have been beautiful.
Right.
All the gauges.
Fired up. Let's hear it run.
Let's do it.
Yep. Now, obviously, we're going to route an intake in here. We got to get our hood back on. And a few other things to tighten up, but we are straight up out of time. And I'm not kidding around about that.
Totally out of time.
Yeah.
But we did a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me this week, and I'll see you next year.
Absolutely.